Just pick something and just start. And for the first time, you have really in your pocket a coach, a tutor, a thing that can just help walk you through this process. A person who has an idea a year ago, way harder to have an idea that had an interface with the back end and for you to make something, way harder than it is today.
And I think what's interesting is, we can think it's a truly South African thing that we don't have the data, we don't. But this is a problem that exists everywhere in the world. It might be more pressing. I mean, we've got a large, massive murder rate in South Africa. Crime is out of control. So maybe the biggest need is here. But it's not a uniquely South African thing, no.
Hi, I'm Bobby.
And I'm Renier, and this is How Would You Build It, a podcast where we interview South African startup founders, business builders, and tech innovators.
And if you like our content, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you're informed of new episodes. But for now, enjoy the show. All right, welcome builders to another episode of How Would You Build It? It's another winter's afternoon in South Africa, but I'm really excited because we've got some new founders to talk to, a very interesting concept, and I'm really keen to hear all about it. But as always, firstly, Renier, welcome back. How are you doing this afternoon?
Thanks, Bobby. Lekker. Yeah, excited. It's always nice when we have deal guests, and then we can just move the questions around a bit. So excited.
Absolutely. And with further ado, Nick and Michael, thank you very much for joining you guys from Community Wolf. It's great to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Cool. All right. So first and foremost, they shared a little story before pressing the record button about their tool. But I think for Nick and Michael, can one of you give us a sort of just a background into what Community Wolf is for the people that haven't heard about it yet? What do you guys do? What problem are you solving?
Sure. So the origin story is really set around, interestingly, WhatsApp, and then trying to tackle probably one of South Africa's biggest problems in public safety. The idea to democratize access to safety toolings in the WhatsApp interface is where Mike and I immediately met, and our visions aligned, and was just, we haven't looked back since, really. I guess I reached out to Mike, stumbling on Twilio for some of your listeners that know where I'm at, and Mike with kind of a meta direct, let's build on top of a language model, let's build quick, just through fuel on the fire.
Amazing. I find that interesting. Sorry, I would love you to carry on going, but I love that founder finding story, because I think a lot of people have an idea and they're kind of not sure how to go about, do they go solo? How do they find somebody that's kind of passionate about the same thing or has the skill set? So sorry for butting in, but I'd love to just elaborate on that kind of story and how you guys actually realized that you shared the same sort of values and interests.
Yeah, so maybe a good point to note is I think your founder relationship's ever evolving for sure. And Nick and I will be the first to tell everyone who's listening that doing this is a really difficult, being a founder is hard, and tackling difficult problems is by definition difficult. But Nick and I have known each other for 15 years. We went to school together. Nick was a few years above me. So really, the high school, boarding school environment, I kind of grew up with Nick as like this 3-4-year-old person who I kind of...
Your senior.
My senior, and I had a lot of respect for him growing up. And I think that already put us on a good footing. And then throughout our years, Nick in New York and in London and me in London, we always kept in touch. And for whatever reason, whenever Nick kind of had an idea, he would run it by me. And it was, that's kind of our relationship has lasted all through those years. And we probably would have tried a bunch of things before this, had opportunities kind of landed differently. So that's our kind of founding story. It really was just Nick had an opportunity, ran it by me, I jumped on it, and 6 months later, we are where we are.
Hey founders, building a startup can be quite lonely. You've got a big vision, no playbook, and let's be honest, your friends don't really get what you're trying to do. But that's where the Founder Collab comes in. It's a private community for early stage founders in South Africa, a space to connect, ask questions, share wins, and get unstuck faster. Whether you're pre-product, post-revenue, or pivoting like a pro, there's someone in the collab who has done it before and ready to help. The best part, it's action-orientated. No fluff, just weekly meetups, intros that matter, and the kind of support you cannot Google. So if you're tired of building alone, come and build with us at the Founder Collab. Check out www.thefoundercollab.com. That's www.thefoundercollab.com. Let's build together. Awesome. And I mean, maybe just elaborate what community wealth is, how it works, and why it matters.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just like the one sentence, we want to make the world a safer place. And like kind of our internal tagline is to ensure all of humanity is safe and protected. And that we think will start in South Africa. That's our home. It's the place that we both grew up in. It's, quote unquote, our first love. It's a place we would like to grow our children up in. And the goal of Community Wolf on the community side is to provide safety tools for every South African for free in their first language in an anonymous, safe, and efficient way, to collect fundamentally a data set that doesn't exist. And that's a data set that tells us and the public about what's actually happening in and around South Africa as that relates to public safety, whether that's crime, suspicious activity, etc., but also service delivery, things like broken robots or traffic lights or lights or potholes or water pipes or whatever, things that affect all of us. And like you guys will be familiar with the broken window theory. We're just trying to make a difference by fixing the broken windows, and hopefully that trickles on kind of throughout the whole business. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I think the disproportionate participation and everything Mike just said is what caught us offside. Like the amount of people that contribute relative to the amount that want to is where we went straight into. Like the first community we dealt with on the ground, Renia, close to you in Stellenbosch, Kaimandi, and we sat with the ward councillors there and a few community leaders, and the pennies just started dropping. So that, just to get back to actually our kind of core mission, was to right size that participation in the South African context, and WhatsApp, again, to circle back, was kind of wedged to access it.
And I think what's interesting is, I mean, we can think it's a truly South African thing that we don't have the data, we don't. But this is a problem that exists everywhere in the world. It might be more pressing. I mean, we've got a large, massive murder rate in South Africa. Crime is out of control. So maybe the biggest need is here. But I mean, it's not a uniquely South African thing, no.
No, I think there are a few countries that map very closely to South Africa, and for all the other founders who want to tackle problems that map nicely to WhatsApp as an example. So for us, public safety, crime, all the things I mentioned, in South Africa, we have one of the highest homicide rates in the world. We have a massive user base of WhatsApp users. We have an enormous private security force, 3 times bigger than the police force. And then we have a massive software spend inside of that industry. And so for us, it's like this melting pot of those kind of things, whether you call them, demographics or stats or whatever they are. But those map identically in Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, Nigeria. So for like other founders who are thinking about ideas, for us, when we went to go raise money, the reality is when you're raising money, you're trying to bring other people on board into your business. You got to try to convince them that this problem exists elsewhere. And for that, you need to have stuff. So for us, it's a relatively easy sell to say, if we can solve this problem here where these same sets of criteria exist, there's no reason why we can't do this in Brazil or Nigeria or Mexico or whatever. But the same might be for any other founder who has an idea that's, I don't know, the ability to sell this thing. Like, does that map in other countries that have the same things? And that's a good reason for you to go there. Certainly for WhatsApp, Africa is a great melting pot for WhatsApp. Like 98% of internet users use WhatsApp. So like, Nick and I know if we can solve a problem, we can do it on WhatsApp, and it's a thing that's close to everyone's heart, which public safety is. And we do it properly. There is no reason for it to just proliferate throughout the whole continent, which would be what a great story that would be.
And Michael, do you see as the data becomes available, right? So let's say you get the critical mass in terms of adoption. What would this do to the existing police force? Would it force their hand now that data is available, now that it's more public? Or how do you see that playing out in terms of the public service?
Yeah, I'll maybe pass to Nick for this, but I'll give my 2 cents is just to maybe give the listeners a bit more info. Our goal is to build this data set of, let's say the what's happening. South Africa become the eyes and the ears. We arm South Africa with the ability to participate, regardless of where you are. And that data set we think is hugely valuable for a number of reasons. But I'll let Nick know. He spent a lot of time with, the CPF and various police forces across kind of the country. But maybe you can give your opinion.
Yeah, so there are 1,154 police stations in South Africa, and as per the SAPS Act, every one of them is mandated to spin up and host a community policing forum. So, one thing when we stepped back, it was all great. We had a tool, but how do we penetrate the structure to actually create impact? We have 1,154 of these circles, and they just vary by size, but they have a general, a brigadier, and various members of civilians, like neighborhood watch participants. And that for us is the kind of structure we're going through, and we are in front of SAP. So in Stellenbosch, the municipal control room and the SAP's control room, as well as the private guys, we have our platform up.
That's interesting. I mean, there's so many questions that can come out of what you guys are doing. It's phenomenal. I mean, on a previous episode, someone told us that in South Africa, you can get a pizza quicker than you can get a policeman to your house, which blew my mind and I think about often. So, being able to do
It
that.
was the guys from Aura. I mean, Aura, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he dropped that bomb, and I was just like, wow, that really like makes you think about things so differently. And I just want to say, like, I want to understand that anonymous element that you guys are bringing to the party, because I think there's also that plays quite a big part, where you can sort of tell on people with a safe mind about it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a good analogy is, whilst we don't want to create a world where there are a bunch of, Karens that are just saying stuff, and worse than that is a bunch of Karens that are making things up. That's obviously a challenge you're working across. Like, how do you verify stuff? And the model in the back of our mind and companies that have done this community-based X or community-based Y, like Waze is one of the most famous uses of making people work together for a specific purpose. And in Waze, the purpose is I want to get from here to there, and I want to do it in the most efficient way possible. And I can only do it in the most efficient way possible if other people use Waze. If there's one Waze used in the world, Waze is awful. And that same statement will stand true for Community Wolf. And that's why we like this idea of the wolf was always like important to us, because I think humans are pack animals and we want to look after each other and after our communities, and at its core, that's what we want to drive, is this ability for you to all work together. And then, as you said, Renier, it's just plug into the systems that already exist, like SAPs and the private security businesses. Like, we want to help enable this whole ecosystem by giving power to the people through a platform that they already use, which, we don't need to go into. I think that's a good idea.
So guys, normally when you start a startup, it's pretty well in most startups that one starts, there's a clear path to get income, build some kind of product that sells something and get money for it. And in your case, you need critical mass because you need a lot of data, because it only becomes useful once you get data. So it's almost a marketplace that you're building, right? You're building a marketplace for data. How do you go about that? Like, what is your strategy to grow and get to the critical mass of data as fast as possible?
Sure. So I mean, there's a lot there, and it's actually funny between the two of us. I've been throwing out all the acronyms to Mike, EBITDA. I can't go chat to investors with. I mean, like, we need something. And it's actually flipped. Now I'm more on the community TikTok spend, let's drum up, and Mike's like, we've got enterprise tools now. But I guess to wind it back, exactly that. We couldn't. It was difficult to go into a control room, especially in front of a decision maker that's highly cost sensitive. The whole response model, without saying too much, is under pressure. People are questioning the value of response, and I have listened to that episode with Warren, but I think you can kind of get the idea that they're guys swarming. For us, we quickly realized there was so much opportunity to build out an enterprise suite of tools for these guys. To scale their interactions with their communities, they have to hire a controller to specifically look at WhatsApp. So there was one opportunity. Sure. And then hardware. These guys have a piece of hardware to scan, specifically up here in Joburg, like your license disc, driver's license, rostering. Like, there's a whole suite that we've kind of latched onto, and we've effectively got our claws into a few control rooms now, offering an almost end-to-end from an internal ops efficiency from that perspective, but then also how they engage their community to know, for their community to understand that they're actually on top of what they're saying.
Yeah, maybe what I'll add is to correct to you is when we started this journey, we thought, and we still do think this, that data is extremely valuable. But the reality is you can't sell data you don't have yet. And we are acutely aware that building we think for the most part, we don't think tech is defensible anymore, really. I mean, some tech is, but for the most part, I think tech is just becoming democratized, or the ability to create tech is becoming democratized day by day. So for us, we want to build a brand that's recognizable across the whole of South Africa, and that is how we will, over time, gain distribution, and that will lead to the data set. And then that is valuable in its own, and we can build intelligence on top of it. But like to Nick's point, and I think we've done a bad job. Oh, I don't think a bad job is the right word. We've struggled to keep up with the pace at which we've learned about this industry and the pace at which we've learned about the problems that exist in this industry. And we've pivoted. I don't want to say pivot makes it sound like the business has changed. It's more just been like we've lifted the arm and just like pulled a little bit more stuff in and a little bit more stuff in. And now for the first time, in the last few weeks, for the first time, we've feel very clear about where we are and where we sit and where we can add value. And it's this, for the people that are looking, it's like this ecosystem that encompasses civilians, the enterprise businesses, which encompass 3 million deskless workers who are on the front line, who really deserve top technology in their pockets, and they can't because the businesses that they work for are cost sensitive, and then the enterprises that kind of pay for those services, and then in between that is all the groups that sit in amongst everything. So we've got three agents that sit, in your pockets. If you're a civilian, in the pocket of an enterprise deskless worker, an agent on WhatsApp groups, and then we have 2 platforms. We have a community platform which we're building out for every person in the world to have access to, and an enterprise platform which is where you can deploy and monitor all of the enterprise agents and infrastructure. And we'll slowly start. I like the word cannibalizing. It sounds pretty hectic, but I like the idea of cannibalizing all the features that these businesses are paying for. Like in an example, you pay for Microsoft because Microsoft has PowerPoint, Word, Excel, whatever. You don't pay for an Excel from this provider and then a Word from this. Like you just do it in one package because it's efficient and everything works together. And if we can become the Microsoft suite for the private security sector, public safety sector, like that's where we want to go. And I think that's why everyone thinks we're this WhatsApp only thing, but there's a whole lot more that has kind of happened over the last 6 months.
That's pretty cool. And I mean, the thing that ties all of us together is the ability to now integrate LLMs into the data and actually remove some of the manual processes and people that were part of the value chain in the past, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, we're switching places here, but just the ability to build. So it's obviously the value you pass it on, but the speed at which we can iterate and build is quite incredible. And I think that's when Mike 7 months ago completely ripped the blinkers off my head. I mean, it's quite incredible what you can do. And yeah, for anyone listening that isn't tinkering, it's
I was going to say, can you give us an example of what that is? Because I think it's moving so fast nowadays about how you can build. And I mean, like I mentioned earlier, coming from a product management point of view, like it's all about that. I loved how you spoke about earlier about that pivot. I mean, it's so bloody normal, even from a feature perspective, not necessarily from a whole product, from a business perspective. When you start building something, you only really start understanding what it is when it starts touching users, and then you start getting that feedback loop. But now, like you said, it's getting the technology is getting so much easier to be made. So tell us about that, your last 7 months that you just mentioned, like that tinkering, what tools you're using, and that sort of one of those aha moments.
Yeah, so I think obviously I think I'm a builder by heart. I've always loved taking things apart and building, and the last 4 or 5 years has really been about re-engaging, learning how to do kind of software development and computer science, if you want to call it that. So I spent a lot of time going deep over the last 4 years, and I don't think that that's required for everyone. For me, it was just an insatiable desire to understand this new wave of tech, and I don't want to claim like I'm early, but I was luckily quite early on. So I've been building alongside the tooling for the last, 2.5, 3 years, which means I've grown up alongside the models and what they can and can't do and what they used to be crap at. And then a model upgrade happened. And I think maybe the one piece of advice I'd give to everyone, and I said this today when we met with someone, because they were worried about, the cost of models. And I said, it's way more of an opportunity cost for you to not have the models turned on doing whatever it is you need them to do, despite of how much it's going to cost, just because you're going to learn a whole lot more about that system, process, framework, whatever it is that you're trying to do. And all that will happen overnight without you doing anything. The model providers are going, because they're incentivized to do this. They're incentivized to make the models cheaper, more efficient, smarter. So without you doing anything, your whole system can get better by an order of magnitude and cheaper by an order of magnitude without you doing a single thing. So that's powerful just on its own. And then just kind of
So you're saying just plug in already, because there's this narrative that goes around a lot of the places I've been exposed to. It's like, we're not ready, we're not ready. We love what it can do and it looks nice and shiny, but we're not ready for that. We're just going to continue doing what we're doing. You're saying plug in ASAP.
Yeah. So to be frank, I think that's bullshit. Basically, I think that people need to be to step up and start building with this stuff, because you really do run the risk of, if let's say I'm correct, that you can have a system that is better one day later without the developers changing anything, the model providers. Let's just say that that's true, okay? For argument's sake, let's say I'm 100% correct on. If that is a truth that exists in the world, how can you afford to not start on the thing that you think you're going to start on? Like, it's just crazy. A person who has an idea a year ago, way harder to have an idea that had an interface with the back end and for you to make something way harder than it is today, where you've got Lovable and Bolt and Cursor and Windsurf and ChatGPT and Claude Code and whatever.
And just something as simple as N8N or Make.com.
Or N8N or even Make or just pick any one of them, honestly. Like, you don't even have to go too far. Just pick something and just start. And for the first time, you have really in your pocket a coach, a tutor, a thing that can just help walk you through this process. And I think people have this fear of struggling through it. I feel like I know what I'm doing, and I will sit frequently for days on a thing that I'm trying to figure out. But I know that's part and parcel of the process. I like building stuff. So for me, it's like this whole process is great. But maybe just to get back to the original question of, like, what's a good example? The example that I will always use for us is, when we started in September last year, we had $0 in the bank account. We didn't have a business funded. We had an idea that was, for the most part, in Nick's head, having spoke to people. And he sent me a message saying, hey, I've got an idea. It's called Wolf, blah, 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 blah. A way for people to report.
There's a bit more than blah, blah, blah.
It was a little more.
Yada, yada, yada.
Like a witness statement. And I think I said to Nick, I'm super busy. I'll get back to you. And I sat on the couch and I was like, I just think that I can do this, and I don't think it'll be too difficult. And I just started. I was like, I'm pretty sure I can find the ChatGPT chat. I was like, hey, I've got this. This is broadly what I'm thinking. Like, quickly just draft me some places to get started. And within 3 days' time, we had a website, we had a front end app, a front end map application, and we had an agent all deployed on WhatsApp in 3 days, in 2 days with one person. And Nick did his first post on LinkedIn. And all of that was possible because of the tooling that we have now, and just the desire to just give it a crack. And reality is, we could have done a worse job than that, and Nick could have still done the post, and it would have got as much traction as it did. And that really left everything. And now we've raised $700,000 in 6 months. We've got VCs behind us. We've got a huge amount of traction. And like, it's all come from you know what I mean? It's like, if that exists, if I'm able to do it, there is no reason why anyone else is not able to do it. It has nothing to do with skill or whatever. I don't know. Does that answer your question, Bobby? I feel quite passionate about that, actually.
I freaking loved that answer. Thank you.
So Michael, I think there's two things that I think. Well, firstly, I think just a tip for anybody listening, and the second thing, just the observation as to, the kind of people that are doing these things. The first thing is, like, I think people get stuck thinking about, like, what AI tool should I use? Should I use Lovable or Replit or whatever, right? And then they think that is, or should I get ChatGPT to write me code, or Cursor, or what should I do, right? So that's the first part of it. The second part, which you mentioned, which I think is super important, is using these tools to actually help you go step by step and completing the different tasks you want to do. I mean, even if you just want to, like, I do a lot on make.com, but just stuff doesn't work. Then I'm like, okay, I literally screenshot the error and go, this is the error I got. Then I'm like, oh, it looks like you're using the wrong API key. Try this one. Then I'm like, okay, cool. Now it works. So in the olden days, I couldn't do that because I couldn't debug what was actually wrong. Like I couldn't get, I mean, you had to pay a developer, and then it just wasn't worth it because that iteration, that small little experiment, is just not worth the money you pay someone to do it. So I think that's an important one. Like using ChatGPT, and please, if you don't have a ChatGPT subscription yet, like just do it or pick one and go for it, Gemini, whatever. But you need to have a paid version, and use it as a coach to guide you. The second thing is, I think what a lot of people find threatening is the fact that some people are builders and tinkerers, and Michael, you alluded to that. I'm a builder and tinkerer myself. I love, I love to like connect things and see if it works, and then go, oh, look at this, and then show my wife, look at my beautiful WhatsApp thing that's doing X, Y, Z, and she's like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I'm like, but it works. So.
Good to know I'm not the only one.
We started this podcast for a reason, guys. We need to
and then
to talk to about this stuff.
But I think there are a lot of people that like to structurally think about what they're not tinkerers, and I think if anybody is a tinkerer, you absolutely have to like be tinkering in this space. If you're not a tinkerer, learn to like go into this workshop of tinkering and playing and experimenting and just build anything. Like I think it's a lot of. I haven't had fun building things this much since grade 10 computer science and Turbo Pascal, like building a makeshift game or something like that. But I mean, that's been 20 years.
Well, I mean, it's funny because I still get that itch, right? Like the Wolf code base has morphed into something that I can't keep up with at all. But I didn't want to subscribe to ClickUp. I wanted to build ClickUp just so that I could scratch an itch. And that annoys Mike, obviously, because I need to be doing other things and rebuild the CI. But like it's everything you guys have just said really bothers me, and that like I want to be building things. It's there. 2 years ago at my previous business, if this tool set was here, we could have made it would have translated into more sales and a more impactful customer service experience or customer experience, put it that way. Like no doubt.
Well, thank God it did, because you wouldn't be here with me, so that's good too.
Oh, there you go.
Wasn't meant to be. So I want to touch on the thing because so obviously the WhatsApp is everyone's using it. It's the top. Like I almost feel like it's getting overdone, but nonetheless has the biggest reach, has the biggest sort of open rates and all of that. Like you cannot deny it. But I have to bring up another famous startup in South Africa that's kind of dabbling in the same space, which is Eskom Push, because they did the whole load shedding as it started, and then they went into this community drive as well. But I think the difference is the fact that you guys are tapping into WhatsApp instead of he has a new app to talk about the things that you want to talk about, because it's all happening on WhatsApp already, right?
Yeah, well, Nick can talk to kind of the from a technical perspective, why we think WhatsApp, and like we call them boundary conditions, I guess, if you want to call them that, is if we want to, for a problem as big as reducing crime to zero, or ensuring everyone is safe and protected, like that's a big lofty goal. We're well aware of that. In order to do that, you really have to touch everybody. You have to be able to reach every single person in as much as you can. And we think that the one place where 98% of the internet users is WhatsApp, which the reason they're on WhatsApp and the reason why we think an app is not the right move for this type of thing, at least not in the early days of it, is that you're dealing with a few things when you start doing with apps. You need phones that have compute that can run applications. Okay, you need phones that have enough memory so that the user can have other applications as well as yours. Okay, and then you end up competing with, should they have TikTok or this app or the fitness app or the YouTube or whatever the other apps may be. And then the access to affordable data. That's another big part. And in South Africa specifically, we have WhatsApp only data plans, which governs people's data use to WhatsApp outside of Wi-Fi. And that's why we think WhatsApp is just this perfect place for us. And it's a familiar platform. And for a team of two, when we started, we didn't have to worry about UI design, or UX. Really. I mean, UX you are still doing because you're dealing with flows and the way conversations. but you are really building back-end infrastructure and logic, which is valuable when you can then move it. That same logic will work when you skin it with a WhatsApp, a native app, basically, which we're not against building an app. It just didn't feel like the right place to start, basically. But like maybe you can talk to kind of the WhatsApp piece as well, the groups and
Yeah, I
stuff.
mean, we agnostic to the communication layer. I mean, if we build out a middleware layer to switch over between Telegram, Signal, and WhatsApp, because in the crime world, there's a very rich layer within Signal and actually Telegram. But again, like in this conversation, talks to a certain LSM. When you're in a community that's worried about their name getting out to a syndicate, there real repercussions. And then again, within an LSM that perhaps this listenership understands is within a WhatsApp group. That's how many communities are interacting with their private security service provider.
Yeah.
So like for us, it was just a no-brainer. And guys in the industry are struggling on Meta specifically and any other like a Twilio to kind of systemize it. So they've been begging for some sort of solution, or guys that hear their pain.
And maybe Bobby, which I think you'll find is super interesting, is another reason why I think for us Meta is great. And an app obviously deals with it, but our costs will soon go to almost zero by operating on top of WhatsApp. Because for one, we don't use WhatsApp for marketing. We don't blast people.
Push.
That's not what we're using it for, which is what the Temus and Sapphire and whatever, like they are pushing marketing utility templates towards you, okay, which costs a lot of money. WhatsApp used to, and it will change in, the recording of this podcast, 16th of June. On the 1st of July, they change over to message-based pricing, which means that all user-initiated conversations are free, okay? So,
really?
Yeah. For us, our users message us first. Okay, we don't send them a template or a blast to initiate anything with them, and we will start remarketing, but like for the most part, which means that, and on civilians that's great, but on enterprise where they're using skills that are like deeply embedded, our cost to serve, aside from the model cost, which again is another piece, is like the model costs are tending towards zero. Like this makes a really a palatable environment for a startup that doesn't have a lot of cash to operate inside of. And like Nick and I are talking about the cost of models as well. The cost of models are reducing to zero. They will go to zero eventually. That's my opinion. And in South Africa, I think what maybe the other difficulty is all models are denominated in dollars. And I think that's why sometimes it feels a lot of pressure for like, the models are not quite there. But I actually think in the background, it's like, this is probably going to be fucking expensive because it's a rand number that in, like where we're building the IP is in the UK, everything's denominated in a dollar. And to me, I'm like, models are super affordable, for like the stuff that they're doing. I'm like, this is super affordable. Why would I not tinker and play around? So I think there's all these competing things, but as a general point, Meta is becoming very affordable if you have conversation-like applications built on top of them, agent-type systems.
Which everything is moving towards.
Which I think is a great business to build off the back of. And that means that the costs are just going to go to zero, which for a founder, like, fuck, that should just be music to your ears, like opportunity. Like, what can I build in this space?
Yeah. I'm actually quite interested. You used Kayamandi, and you can then compare it to a Kailicha or some in Alexandra or whatever. What about rural areas? And I mean, like that's another thing. I did a bit of stalking, and I saw you guys were doing. You can add an area to your thing. I don't know. Maybe just explain that. And I'm quite curious about understanding that and how that fits into a different sort of area base, a high density area like a Khayelitsha versus in the middle of the Free State, that's a farm, and where there's probably just as much crime and it's just as much important things to be watching out for.
So there are two sides there. There's yourself, Bobby. What are you looking out for? And then on the other side of that, who's responding? So where's that sort of alert that you send in, or your message? Where's that ingested, and what's the output of that? What control room screen does it hit?
Okay.
So within Stellenbosch, as an example, every sort of part of Stellenbosch out towards the farms are mapped to a specific control room, and then like a Kaimandi, Clutersville are also mapped to those control rooms, but there's a triage in the sense that SAPs and the municipal law enforcement control room are the kind of like priority responder. SAPs have to be at everything, but I guess to answer your question, there's a lot there. Like, I mean, if you're on a farm and your kind of response cohort is the neighboring farmer and his bucky, and his responder is his neighbor with a bucky, you can kind of like, it's almost like security in a box we spoke about, where you can create your own network and response nodes, depending on how you want to utilize it effectively.
Yeah, and maybe if areas are unclear to anyone, and again, we should get better at describing what they are, and we're going through a whole, positioning and thing like how do we actually explain exactly what this beast is? Because to your guys' point, how we started the conversation, we're a data gathering thing, but there's a whole lot of other stuff going on. And an area really for us, what we think of an area is we don't know a lot about our users. We know we have their contact detail as an example. That's it. And that's the only unique identifier. We don't know anything about them, where they live, etc. But we do know the areas that they care about. So we know the areas that they demarcate out, and you can do this if, for the listeners and for you guys. If you go to Wolf, the first thing it will ask you when you sign up is, let's make an area for home or for school or for work. And you just drop a pin in those areas. And then essentially what Wolf does is create a geofence around that space. And if anything ever falls in that space or report, it will distribute it. So if another user, if Renier drops a pin, it will distribute it to you, Bobby, if you had work, basically. And that's our way of creating this virality in social media, but also to connect all these people together through the areas that they care about, because in fact, those are the only places they care about. And the analogy I'll give you is, if you're on a WhatsApp group and someone says, I've lost my cat, that's terrible, but like a lot of people on that group don't really care that you lost your cat or that the rubbish didn't get picked up or whatever the example might be. With areas, we give people the ability to dictate where geographically do they care about, and then soon we'll add the ability for you to care exactly, for you to say exactly what do you care about inside of that area. So I only want to be alerted petty theft, violent crime, fires, power outages, whatever. I don't want to know about people's stolen cats or fires.
I like that.
Whatever. You get to dictate what you want, and effectively it acts like a group, but it's your group, just with you in it.
And you can sort of curate the kind of stuff that you want to be hearing about, and not get the currents annoying you.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's super interesting.
That's such an important thing, and I mean, once again, now with the combination of WhatsApp and AI, I think you can start doing things like this, which is really interesting. Because I'm interested, now that I think about it, I'm interested about what happens in certain areas in Stellenbosch, not only areas where I stay, but other areas are actually interesting for me as well, for varying different reasons. For other people, they don't care at all. For other people, they just want to know what happens around their house. And that is very hard to determine at scale. You almost need to allow a user to dictate that for themselves. You can't just go, oh, you live in Stellenbosch in this area, so you would definitely be interested in X, Y, and Z. That's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
I think the one thing, if I could answer your question again, is there's an element of letting people use the tool how they see fit within the nuance of their community. So in December, I was sitting at a table and someone randomly brought it up there. In Stellenbosch, in Somerset West, people seem to be using it more for traffic and like lights that are out or have the exact content. It was almost a bit of a, that's interesting. We're optimizing around XYZ. Maybe there's a service delivery component. So that's opened up a whole new kind of.
That's so fascinating. I work in the property industry, and areas and geofencing and polygraphs and shapes and all of that is a daily conversation, because there is no standard in South Africa. There is a certain brand, which I'll refuse to name, that kind of created that sort of standard for us, because there was nothing. And it's super interesting, because I had that very thought. It's like, how do you start classifying an area? You want to start understanding what happens in there. Like, hey, I want to buy a property in this area, but I don't understand it very well. What are people talking about? What are people worried about in that area? And I think that there's quite a nice overlap there.
I see integration coming.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Yeah, like
Product managers
imagine if there was a wolf index. You know, I mean, this is in a world where we have millions and billions of data
Yeah.
points, what's happening, and we tapped into the, what's going on in an area. And you can, I mean, even now you can ask the wolf with any reports in my area and drop a pin and it'll, check the area, or you can say, check the news in my area and it'll also do the same thing. But you can go down to the point of, maybe Wolf knows all the way down to the minutia of like what are the crime stats in that area and like how livable is it? And if you're a tourist,
exactly.
as you just check with Wolf, like, I mean, like an example I'll give, in the UK, you can download the public crime data set, 20 million, it's like 20 million dots, essentially. It's nuts. If you map it with a 1 meter dot, you can barely see anything on the map. It's just red everywhere. And
There has been crime everywhere.
when I live, like there's like 9 stabbings on the road I walk every single morning and the road my wife walks home in at night. And like for me, I'm like, if I'm going to walk, I want to tell Wolf, hey, I'm going to the station. Wolf should say, I don't think you should go that way. Go the long way around because statistically the weather is XYZ and this is the most safest route for you to go. In the same way that you do with Waze. Waze will send you this way as opposed to this way because there's XYZ down the road. Like we're really thinking of this as like this highly interconnected ecosystem because that's what it should be. Like safety is by definition an ecosystem of all of us living together. If there were 7 of us in a village, we would all care about the safety of each other. We're just in a much bigger village now, but I think fundamentally we all still care.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like in moving to a freestanding home here in Joburg, if I leave my garage open, a neighbor in my area will send a message on a group to say, hey, 33, your garage is open. I don't know if an area I'm perhaps going to move into next has the same kind of
Care.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of, that's what we're picking up in groups now that we're interacting in. There's softer side. Maybe there's not a crime stat that's printed, but there's certainly a prevention mechanism and community that we're tapping into, and it's incredibly powerful.
And maybe if one last point is to your point, Bobby, of like why AI and why we're using this stuff. This is the worst that Community Wolf will ever be because fundamentally we built on top of models, and this is the worst the models will ever be. And we know, and we are very much thinking about like, what does this look like in 4, 5, 6, 7 years time? Like, what's the tech we have available to us? And I know what we've been able to build in 7 months. If you gave us 10 times more money and 10 times longer, like how much of an impact could we actually make? And like I really do think that when you get, and we've built a great platform and a foundation to kind of have a real crack at this. It's not to say we'll be successful or not, but we're in a really good position to do so. We're building for the future in mind, and like the agents that sit on our groups and the tooling and the skills that we've given them, they will only get better at using them. 1. 2, we will always over time be able to give it more complex and complicated jobs and skills to manage and use. And like that's just such a cool little ecosystem to be involved in. And I think like public safety is one problem. South Africa's got a myriad of other problems that affect every single part of our life. And like if a call to South Africa existed, I'd say like South Africans, like put your head down and think about the tech in 5 years and how do we solve our problems now with a 5-year look at the future. And like, we can go make a real difference with this
Spoken
stuff.
like a true builder.
Yeah.
So guys, both of you are quite active on LinkedIn and maybe even other social channels. Maybe talk a bit about the thinking there, and I think specifically a lot of founders go, "Ish, man, I'm so busy building. Like, where am I going to get time to create content or write stuff? Even if you're not a good writer, like now you have to learn how to write, and it just takes too much time." Like, tell us a bit about the thinking there and how you go about creating the content.
Yeah, I mean, I think LinkedIn is probably, like Mike said to me, cool, we want to go solve this problem, Nick, you're extremely passionate about it, but you can't put something on LinkedIn because I find it cringy or whatever the case is. And it's led to, one post led to this person connecting us to that person. Next thing we're in an accelerator. Next thing we've got our first dollar in an offshore entity. And I'm scratching my head thinking, oh, like, this is 3 months old from one LinkedIn post. So this is all Mike's doing. He's a Swiss Army knife, but like one of the little blades in there is his appreciation for like putting yourself out there. And like if you are mission led and impact led, like tell people about it. And it doesn't mean to say you need to be mission led or impact led, but there's an ecosystem of people out there that are incredibly willing, not necessarily in the comments section, but certainly in the messages. It's definitely worth putting yourself out there, is all I'd say.
Yeah, and we get asked a lot, or I get asked actually a lot, because I'm very active on LinkedIn. I try post every single day. I try be honest and open about challenges and success. And to be honest, like just saying it how it is, I had a YouTube channel for the better part of 10 years. And when I started, I was so scared of what people thought of me. And it's taken a long time to get to the point where like I just don't give a fuck. Like I care about what I'm doing deeply. And I know in my soul and my heart, and just being logical, if I can tell the story of this business and this brand and like what we're trying to do, one, it'll get people to believe in us, and like that's great for the psyche and momentum and whatever. But for people to believe in the brand that this is actually something that's possible is another thing. But for founders, for founders who want to go and raise money, and that's not to say you have to go and do that. You do not have to go and do that. You can bootstrap, have a great business. We don't think that we have the luxury of not going big. This is a really fucking hard problem to solve. Sorry, I don't even know if we're allowed to swear on this podcast.
It's good. It's late now.
Sorry.
Keep going.
That can get blanked out. This is a really difficult problem to solve, and we know we were going to need to raise money. And I just felt very passionate that half of the battle of raising is getting people to believe in you and to believe that you guys are the right people to do this. And I just thought the mechanism to do that is to be me and unequivocally me, and the same for Nick online, where people can see and breathe our story. And I really do think, aside, and that led to traction, which we were then able to put in the deck and present. But like our brand and like us being out and about in the world I really do think it was like maybe the most pivotal thing about this whole last 7 months, if not it has to be the most pivotal thing that we did, was actually just share what we were doing.
Harder than the tech, actually.
Yeah, much harder than the tech.
It was harder for us to align on that than like, cool.
But that's
and sorry, Bobby. And then the TikTok piece. So like LinkedIn, again, we're not going to grow a user base off of LinkedIn.
No, we'll get investors and partners.
We're going to grow a brand around us, our brand, a bit of reputation that you guys are founders, that you're South African founders, you're founders solving a hard problem, and you're doing it with purpose, and you're actually showing up day after day after day after day. So that's great. TikTok and other social platforms, although I think they're all very nuanced, but let's just say TikTok is kind of, I really do think, the core for something like this. If you want to touch every single person, meet them where they are on WhatsApp, but they're on TikTok, and like our TikTok channel has grown to 20,000 followers in like whatever it is, 3 months or something like that. And we've now started tinkering with putting money behind stuff and ads and all this kind of stuff. And the coolest thing about it is, and I wish I could share this on screen, is like, it feels like you're talking directly to the person using this thing. And the comments we get are, nuts, all the way from this will never work because you guys are two white boys and white people don't care, all the way through to like, thank God this is here, and thank you that you guys are doing this in South Africa. We need this, all the way through to, everything in between. But you feel like you are actually talking directly to the
actual
people,
users and customers.
If you read, every startup book you've ever read in your life, like all they say is like, get as close as you can to the customers. And how do you get closer to the customers than literally talking directly with them in the comments? So anyway, like the point of the social media thing, I almost don't think it's an option. I think it's actually a requirement of a modern day founder because of AI, all this sort of stuff. Like, how do you actually differentiate yourself from Tim and Steve and Susan and Tandor using GPT to write their posts? The only way to differentiate is to not be like them, is to be you. Because that's the only way. Everyone has access to Gemini and GPT. Be you. Just be you. Don't put too much thought into it. Like, pitch up. And like to university, I said this to my cousins. I was like, you're at university, start posting on LinkedIn every single week. It's a requirement. I will hold you to account. Make sure you do it. Because how do you stand out? Like,
exactly.
Yeah, I think
I've given the same advice. I have given the exact same advice. So I just want to start wrapping up now, guys. So you mentioned earlier that you've got funding. What does that, where is that funding going? What are you guys planning to use it for? What does the next sort of 6 months to a year look like for you guys?
Sure. So I think, again, early on in the journey, we both aligned on the fact that if we were able to get this up off the ground as quickly as we did, other people can too.
Yeah.
So it became very much about the brand. And again, just to touch on the point, like him and I aligning and staying in sync is like the biggest thing for this thing, because we're moving so quickly and we're not sat next to each other every day. Yet we chatting every day, we're building every day. So our relationship and our brand have become like the kind of key things. But then in saying that, speed, yeah, and scaling the kind of the brand has a cost associated to it. Going Africa, ex-South Africa has a cost associated to it. The early discussions we had with guys in Mexico, Brazil, that's going to have a cost associated to it. And I think in priming this for a seed round, having runs on the board ex-South Africa is what markers we need to hit. And yeah, well, it goes with, I mean, implicit that in the need for speed, there's getting support around Mike specifically, and then up here in Joburg operationally to scale out our enterprise features, we're going to need support guys on the ground, managing our device suite.
So all being lucky, hopefully in the next few weeks we'll be able to announce like the growth of the team in a much more formal capacity. But those discussions haven't they formalize in as much as they can, but it'll be an announcement that we'll make. But like growing our team and building, like putting a few other world-class human beings above and beyond Nick and I is a great thing to have on the team deck when you go to a seed round. That's another thing. It's like the team and the brand around you is so important nowadays. I mean, you guys will agree. You guys have got a really well-known brand in South Africa. Like what differentiates you guys? You have a great, well-established brand with distribution. Like that's the thing that really the tech is. People can write articles like you guys. People can, make a newsletter. Like that's not the defensible thing. The thing is like brand and distribution and the team that you have. That's the stuff that other people can't have.
I mean, we doing psychometric tests and putting them through a model and like simulating this personality with Mike and myself, or with Mike in this context and myself in this context. And when
you guys are proper thinkers.
Yeah, we the team is this is what's gonna make or break this thing.
Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff Mike would say when you do X.
No, don't say anything back.
I just take it.
Yeah, very 2025 conversation, this one, I tell you that. Wow.
Love it.
Yeah. Rene, any last questions or remarks before we let the guys go out?
This is really cool.
Yeah, I have to admit, very cool. And I agree, big problems to solve. You guys seem super passionate. So I'm really excited to see where you guys come along, and look forward to future collaborations. Who knows, hey?
Epic. Yeah, us too.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having us.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.